Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Beef Brunch news update on Tuesday, March 2nd. My name is Ashley Edwards, and with me are Lee Falk, Vince Desatel, and Jason Holmes. Lee, I'm going to go ahead and let you kick it off if you don't mind giving us our weather and forage field update for Northwest Louisiana, as well as anything else you want to talk about today.
Good morning, everyone. Glad to be with y'all today. What a change we've had since our last news update. So the story on everybody's minds, as I'm sure all of you are aware, especially those of you north of Alexandria, is the winter storms that we saw roll through the area last week and so on. We had snow come through first. Got a pretty good coating of snow, anywhere from 3 to 5, 6 inches up near the state line. Amounts got higher, and that wasn't too terribly bad. Followed by record breaking low temperatures, in fact, dipping into the negative territory on some in some locations, and that was followed up by either sleet or freezing rain or more snow. I've heard wide variations in amounts. Jason may be able to touch some more higher amounts up in northern Union Parish, north on the state line of Arkansas. Of course, some locations saw 10 to 12 inches in places of snow with a little sleet. Further south, you got into some freezing rain, which really wreaks havoc on the infrastructure as far as power systems and such. The big headline, of course, in a lot of people's minds is losses that they incurred during this winter event. We saw quite a few barns go down. I'm sure Jason will touch on that in his segment. But we saw quite a few producers, especially in north central Louisiana, lose barns. Not just sheds that were expected to fall any minute. We're talking about some pretty significant structures: hay barns, equipment sheds, cattle sheds, horse barns, you name it. Several of them hit the ground. Of course, the biggest thing that we've been dealing with is poultry houses that fell due to snow and ice load, and we're still gathering data on this. And hope to have some estimates out maybe in a future news update. But it's kind of an ongoing story. You keep talking to people and trying to gather information to get a damage assessment done on this thing, and you keep finding people that said, "Oh well, my neighbor lost a hay barn that we didn't know of," or somebody right down the road from them has a chicken house that's about to fall in. They're trying to shore it up and trying to stabilize the situation. So it's really been a challenging week. Aside from structures, the guys and ladies that were on spring cabin systems seem to suffer the worst. Quite a few spring-born calves, especially if they were calving during the storm, lost some calves. There were some valiant efforts made to warm calves up. Talked to people and they felt like they were in Montana or the Dakotas on a spring calving system, trying to get calves in their houses, get them in their trucks, do whatever it took to keep them warm, and it worked on quite a few. But there was also several losses per producer, I would say, that was on a spring calving system. The damage it didn't extend so much into the mature cow herds. I've talked to numerous producers that lost some older, weaker type cows. Some cows are in poor body condition, but it seems like the losses were fairly isolated to newborn calves. Of course, yearlings fared pretty well. With that being said, as far as pasture conditions, whenever everything finally melted off 6, 7 days later, it seemed ryegrass looked terrible, very bad. But over the last week since then, we've seen some warm temperatures, highs up in the 70s, but more importantly, some nighttime lows that were fairly moderate. And ryegrass appears to be bouncing back now. Still quite a bit of damage on there. Talked to a guy that had planted some Gulf ryegrass that he's pretty certain he lost his stand, but time will tell on that. We're this warm stretch has definitely helped, but with the warm weather has come rain. We have gotten a tremendous amount of rain over the last few days. and went from wet conditions to absolutely wet conditions. It's absolute bog hole even on the hills, and more rain forecast this week. So wish I could say that it was going to dry out, but it's going to be a few days before we see that. We hope that this ryegrass and other winter forages are going to pop back, and I think they will. I looked at a clover field the other day, 2 days ago now, that is really starting to bounce back quicker than what I thought it would. And I'm going to end on this note. I know I've rambled on quite a bit about this storm, but it's a touchy subject. But we take events like we just went through, and you have to try to learn some lessons. And one of them that I think is important for us to remember as cattle producers, livestock producers, is insurance. That's a bad word to some folks, but I'm just going to say this. We all carry insurance to one degree or another. Some people have comprehensive coverage on their farm, and all structures and everything. Others just have it on equipment or whatnot. Take a chance and review your insurance policy with your provider. Check to see what you are covered for and what you're not. Many producers while they had insurance on a barn, they may have only been covered for wind or for fire, or any combination, but weren't covered for snow loads. And while we hope this is a once in a generation, once in a 30-year event, you have to reach back that far to get an event like this, it may serve you well to visit with that insurance provider and try to make sure that you're covered for every eventuality, including snow and ice loads, as we move forward in the future. So continue to kind of assess the damage and try to find out exactly what we're facing as far as this goes. That's all the update I have for right now, Ashley.
Hey, thank you. I was listening or looked up the weather this morning, and there was a little update that came on my phone that said, "How long will the South stay soggy?" It's a tongue twister there, but I was like, soggy doesn't begin to cover what we're seeing right now. It's just disgusting. Vince, how does it look in South and Central Louisiana?
Well, thank y'all for having me. It was remarkable here as well. We're in the central part of the state, 75 miles from the Gulf, basically. There were death loss on cattle, from north to south. I mean, along the coast. As you move further south, we're predominantly Brahman influenced type cattle. They're thin skinned, can't take the cold as well as some of these more English type cattle. So therefore we had some death loss. I mean, we reached to the teens at the Gulf Coast, so it was pretty tough on a lot of cattle. That day on Wednesday, 2 weeks ago, it'd be 2 weeks Wednesday coming, when it rained all day and it didn't get out of the 30s. That was pretty tough if you didn't have shelter for those cattle. And a lot of our producers were either finished calving or right in the middle, or just at a period where in our case in this area, we start calving this past week. We had a number of newborn calves, and God blessed us with better weather. So we've had success there. So concerning the ryegrass or our winter pastures, as Lee alluded to, I mean, it was most of everybody kind of mob grazed, knowing that ice coverage was coming. Got it cut down short. When the temperatures kind of rebounded, I guess last Thursday, Friday, ryegrass began to grow. I mean, an inch a day. It was remarkable. We left to go to the state livestock show on Friday morning, came back on Saturday evening, and when we got out and looked at things yesterday morning, I was like, good grief, how much has this grown in a 3-day period? I mean, it's like ready to graze again. So it was in the upper 70s for most of 3 days. And cattle were, I went right through them on Saturday night when I got back, and it was warm. The calves were laid out like they were resting. So it was a stressful period for those 5 days of below or near freezing temperatures, frozen water troughs. The only saving grace with the freezing or cold rain on the Wednesday was we had place for cattle to drink. They could get off in the fields and ditches and drink, because everything was just froze. So nice rebound. Unfortunately, we had a lot of calves lost at birth. not too many mature cattle and yearlings, as Lee alluded to. But then again, we still seeing some stress in some of these cattle coming out of that freeze event. So hopefully the weather stays warm and we get moving forward. As far as spring practices, people are getting out there. We haven't gotten the rain y'all got in the northern part of the state. Fortunately, we don't need a drop, and we haven't had any since that Wednesday of freezing rain. And it's dried out nicely. And here we are today with a nice north wind blowing, kind of rain south of us, rain to the north of us. But it's a nice dry period that we're experiencing, so that's good. But cattle consumed a lot of hay in that week of freezing temperatures. So some producers are running short. But we've been blessed with the warmer temperatures, and we're starting to see clover emerge pretty rapidly, and the ryegrass rebound. So moving forward, I think we're going to see a lot of good in some of our winter planted pastures. So hopefully that it doesn't get too much colder, and we can move into spring. As sitting on March 1st, we should be good here 2 weeks out and moving forward.
Great, thank you. I want to touch on something real quick before I turn it over to Jason. So I know for those of you that are starting to have calves hit the ground now, you're probably also starting to look forward into your upcoming breeding season. So for those of you that are looking at replacement heifers, whether you're purchasing your own or keeping some, we do have some videos on our YouTube channel. So if you're watching this, there's a chance you found it on YouTube, but it's LSU Ag Center Livestock. You can find a playlist on heifer selection. I think we've got a handful of videos that we did at the Hill Farm there that just kind of go over some of the priorities there for heifer selection. And then just a reminder to go ahead and start preparing for that breeding season with your vaccinations and everything else. Go ahead and get with your veterinarian. Make sure your bulls are ready, but make sure your cows and your heifers are ready to go as well. Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you for our Northeast update and our market reports.
All right, thank you, ma'am. I'll just say ditto to most everything that's already been said. I will touch on the poultry real quick, just in terms of what we're looking at. So we're right at about 41 houses confirmed that are beyond repair. They're a total loss. So that's pretty devastating to this area right through here. And you're talking about a 4-parish area. That's pretty significant. I know that there's a lot of work right now trying to get a secretarial disaster designation, which will open up some additional disaster money to agriculture. And right now, about the only thing that we've got is the Livestock Indemnity program through Farm Service Agency and ELAP. We were hoping that the ECP program would provide some relief, but it really doesn't look like that's going to happen. Just in terms of qualification, Livestock Indemnity program has got a pretty high normal mortality rate at 5%. And I really don't know how most of our folks. I don't know that they'll be above that 5%. That's what FSA says a normal mortality would be 5%. So, and I think that's going to be pretty difficult to qualify for. ELAP, Emergency Livestock Assistance Program, could help folks if you had to purchase feed during lost grazing time. So if you were unable to graze ryegrass due to the winter storm, that ELAP program may be able to assist you there. But please reach out to your local Farm Service Agency office. Visit with them about those programs. If we can get a secretarial designation, some of those rules may be lightened a little bit, but until we get to that point, we really won't know. I commend Lee for making the comments he did on insurance. So we're figuring about 80% of the farm structures that are out there have got some level of compromise to the structural integrity. That's poultry houses, farm structures in terms of implement sheds, hay barns, and most of them out there, 80% of them out there, are going to have some sort of compromise to that structural integrity. Driving down to the state show, beef shows, and there's the landscape is just littered with farm structures that you see damage on. It's pretty disheartening, but I commend Lee for those comments. Very good comments. So looking at the market, so past week's slaughter was at just over 600,000 head. That's a near high for the year and about 38,000 above last year. Previous 2 weeks slaughter of 552 and 608. That's 552,000 head and 608,000 head left a gap in the supply chain for us. We seem to keep finding ourselves in these, I've heard them referred to as black swan events. And each event takes more of a toll on the supply and demand balances. And those typically do not play into the favor of the cattlemen, which is unfortunate to our audience that's normally listening to these. So it's been rough. As most of you have seen on the news, so the third approved vaccine with an emergency use designation approved by FDA, so Johnson & Johnson's vaccine will begin distribution immediately. And the reason I bring that up is because that directly affects the restaurant market. So we continue to see piece by piece, little by little, some of these restrictions being lifted on the restaurant segment, and that's good news for meat retailers. So hopefully, or meat wholesalers, I should say. So being able to move that into the retail industry. So the more we can get some more of these vaccines out there, the better. That's going to hopefully lift some of those restrictions, and we can continue to move meat, specifically beef, through the markets. The caveat to that, I guess I would have to err on the side of caution. It's going to be interesting to see how many of those restaurants may not ever open back up after being shut down so long. On the cattle side of the markets, there was light fed cattle cash trade to finish up the week. This will be the fourth week that cash market trading has landed between 113 and 114, specifically more like that 114 area. As of Friday in the 5-area feeding region, fed steer negotiated cash sales ranged 112 to 117, so that lands us right there on that $114 a hundredweight on a confirmed 39,593 head on that fed steer negotiated cash. Cattle futures continue lower. So most recent quotes are showing April down 25 cents at 119.75, June down 52 cents at 117.90, and August down 40 cents at 116.65. 5 to 600 pound steers, medium, large ones and twos, sold between 142.54 and 153.60. So that is steady from our previous week of sales. So you got to stop and think about, so we're going back 2 weeks because most of our livestock sales were shut down last week. So that's basically looking back 2 weeks. So steady from the last time that we had those market reports. 700 to 800 pound feeder steers, medium and large ones and twos, sold between 122 and 130. So that's $2 to $6 higher from the previous week. Most recent quotes on that same class of cattle show April down 95 cents at 141.62. May down 80 cents at 144.27, and August down 20 cents at 151.75. So as we've reported in the last few news updates, our coil cow market is continuing to be on the rise, as we would hope it would. So lean coil cows were steady to 3 cents higher from the previous week, ranging 55 cents a pound to 59 cents a pound. So moving into our feedstuffs, soybean meal trading down $1.90 at $451.50 a ton. Soybean hulls are steady at $155 a ton. Cottonseed meal steady at $460 a ton. Whole cottonseed down $5 at $325 a ton. Rice bran is steady at $140 a ton. 60% corn gluten feed is up $5 at $735 a ton. And I'll just add you a footnote in there. That is over $200 a ton higher than where we were this time last year. DDGs are up $10 at $240 a ton. That's about little over $100 a ton higher than we were this time last year. And corn is trading 3 cents a bushel higher at $5.71 a bushel. And that's all I've got, Ashley.
All right, thank you. A couple of things as we wrap up. So next week will be our monthly webinar. So that's going to be Tuesday, March 9th at 10:30 a.m. Again, those are live events, but we will also have it recorded and posted online later during the week. We will have Mr. Brian Miller with Louisiana Department of Ag and Forestry on, and he's going to be talking about how you can market your beef here in Louisiana. The other thing that I want to mention is a new program that we're looking at starting this year, and we'll have it kind of advertised later on this week. We're still working on finalizing the dates. That is going to be a beginner cattleman program. So it is specifically designed for producers with 10 years of experience or less, or for people who would like to join the cattle industry. So, purchasing land and you want to get cattle for that. I'm your contact for that. If you have questions, you can reach out to me. My contact information is in the video and podcast descriptions. It is going to be a hybrid course, meaning there's going to be some pre-recorded online version or online lectures, as well as in-person workshops. So that way we can hopefully get you as much hands-on experience as we can in those workshops. So just be on the lookout for more information on that coming out later this week. I'll also get our Beef Brunch website updated soon to have Mr. Miller's information on there for our webinar next week. And with that, we hope that you all stay dry and safe, and we will see you again in a couple of weeks.